Thank you, snowboarding.
Thank you,
snowboarding.
Snowboarding, grazie, grazie.
Hey friends, how you doing? My name is Chris Cracknell. I am your host. Thank you, Snowboarding, the podcast that is all about UK snowboarding culture and history, which has been front and centre the last couple of weeks due to the Winter Olympics at Livigno, and want to send a shout out to everyone representing Great Britain and our culture, all the athletes, Tim and Ed on the commentary, Jenny on the commentary, anyone else that had anything to do with it that makes our little corner of our lovely sport such a great place to be. If you're new to the podcast, having watched some of that and you want to know more, then what I do is talk to people each week about their involvement in the sport, whether it's from back in the day, hand building snowboards and riding the downs, for instance, through to the current crop of UK shredders who are showcasing their talents worldwide and representing us all. And we do this with the kind support of our friends at the Snowboard Asylum, who have been helping snowboarders since the very beginning in this country. If you are new to the sport and you need some great advice, then go and see those guys. Try and get down to one of their shops. You'll find more experience and knowledge than they know what to do with. So this week, speaking to someone that I've been in contact with for the last couple of years, a guy called Bryan. A name that you won't recognise, but back in the 80s, he was a semi-pro skateboarder sharing a deck with the likes of Sean Goff, whose name comes up on this podcast fairly regularly, and discovered snowboarding, hand-built his own board, you know, a proper pioneer in this country. And then in the 90s, he got in touch with Burton about helping them sort of develop their business, develop their quality control specifically. And that led him to basically buying a plane ticket with no money, going out to Vermont, getting in touch with them, helping them out. And then that ended up in a job that he then did for the next many years. And he's still based over in Vermont, and he's still shredding as much as possible. So this is a really fascinating chat. We do get fairly geek level about kind of snowboard manufacturing and all processes and stuff like that, but I really loved it. It was great to finally get to talk to him in the flesh. And one of the sort of unsung stories behind the main story of British snowboarding. And this is kind of part of what makes the UK scene so special. So let's go. Bryan, quality control.
You guys like timelines, so
I've been told some listeners do like dates and times. Yeah.
Well, I've got a bunch of them, so you know we can, and we'll branch off as we go. You know, there's all sorts of different branches and stuff that, you know, all sorts of side stories. But,
well, I mean, given that you're sat on the east coast of America, you clearly aren't from the east coast of America.
Nope, I am from Lincoln.
Lincoln, that soon to
Go
be
on, Chris.
underwater.
150
Lincoln.
miles north of London.
No. I know full well where it is. I've been to a dry slope up that way. I was just thinking in my brain because I was thinking of Lincoln Cathedral, which kind of sticks out as a bit of it's quite flat, isn't it? And then it's the biggest thing for miles around. So I was just thinking about that. That's my brain got kind of stuck on that.
No, you're absolutely right. That's the first thing I would have thought of as well, because it's basically flat apart from the one hill that the cathedral's on.
So given the lack of hills, how did you get into snowboarding?
All right, so let's go back to the beginnings. All right, so I'm a long-time skater. First started skating in 76.
Okay, paint that picture of what that looked like and how you got into that.
I was on holiday down in St Ives in Cornwall. I was probably like 13 at the time.
Yeah.
And saw a guy just cruising down the street on a homemade thing with roller skate wheels. And I was just, what the hell is that? And it stuck in my head. And when I got home, I stole one of my sister's roller skates, split it in half, put it on a plank, and started cruising down the path on it. And it sort of took off from there. So badgered the parents to get me a semi-decent board, and just ended up just doing that all the time.
Where would they have got you a board in Lincoln? Was there a skate shop or anything?
There was. It wasn't so great. I think the first one I got was mail order.
Right.
There was a Surrey skate shop, and at the time, a lot of folks were doing mail order stuff from there. There's Alpine Sports as well. It was down in Covent Garden, and we used to go down to London. Fast forwarding a little bit, but we used to get a lot of stuff out of there as well.
Right.
So yeah, it was. It sort of went from there, and I was doing it forever, and eventually started getting into competitions. And well, I don't know how much you know about the early '80s, late '70s, and early '80s in terms of skateboarding, but there was almost none in Britain.
Well, I was going to say, like, where would obviously you'd seen someone doing it, and then you sort of jump forward to going to competitions, but how would you have known those competitions even existed? Was there magazines or?
Yeah, let's go back to facilities for a second, because you have to have somewhere to do it, right?
Yeah.
If you're not, because bear in mind, we're at the point where street skating as it is now, just didn't exist.
No.
Street skating was cruising down the road. Like this thing was something that I skated to school on, like 3 miles each way in Lincoln.
Yeah.
But
I guess the lack of hills, sorry to jump in, but I guess the lack of hills in Lincoln was probably quite good as a skateboarder.
It was, although you'd be surprised, there is actually, well, the way the cathedral's sorted, it's on a big ridge.
Right.
And it's not massive, but it's big enough.
Yeah.
This is one of the side stories coming up. There's a hill further out from the cathedral that is kind of, or it was kind of in the middle of nowhere. And we used to go there and do downhill.
Right.
And a friend of mine, Pete, and we went out there one day. The weather was looking sketchy. We thought we'd get a couple of runs in. We set off down this hill. I kind of made it down. As Pete was halfway down, this thunderstorm broke. A lightning flash exploded one of the resistors on one of the electric poles.
No way.
He just splatted and ended up with such bad road rash. He couldn't wear pants for weeks. So it's that kind of stuff. But we got to grips with a bunch of people. Like in Lincoln itself, there were some, especially surrounding villages. I mean, I wasn't technically in Lincoln itself. I was in a tiny village outside of it. And so there's some other folks there as well. And we knew other ones that were sort of around.
Yeah.
And again, no internet. So, the only way we could get in touch with people was either phone or actual physical writing letters.
Yeah. Of course.
And that happened. We were writing stuff when we needed to, and we'd phone each other to arrange when we were going to actually meet up and do all of this kind of stuff. It was a very, very different time, but it worked. And we skated together. But in terms of facilities, that was when things started getting interesting, because I'd been to this is sort of late '70s. Do you remember a skate park called Skate City in London? No.
I mean, I was young in the '70s, so
there you go. But sort of 77, 78.
Right.
There was an old concrete skateboard park called Skate City in London, and it was one of the first ones that was in the magazines.
Whereabouts in London would that be?
It was on a derelict site. There was a battleship close to it. I can't remember exactly where. It was on the South Bank, I know that.
Right.
Not the South Bank,
No.
but on the South Bank of the Thames.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was again, late '70s. There was still a lot of London that was derelict from the war.
Absolutely.
So this giant patch of concrete and rubble, somebody had put the skate park on. And of course, I was desperate to go there, so I badgered my dad to take me down there, and ended up meeting a bunch of people down there. That was the precursor for a lot of stuff. But that was all. That was the first experience of really sort of concrete bowls, and I started.
How did you take to it?
Actually, I loved it. There was this weird thing. There was a color scheme. There was like a blue bowl, a red bowl, and a black bowl.
Right.
And you actually had badges with colors on it, and you had to do an assessment test.
No way.
To be able to ride one of the bowls.
It was that organised.
It was that organised. Not many people really took it seriously, but that was what you had to do. So So I had to do the various things. I got in the black bowl, and it was fine. And was carving around and stuff. That was good. But I wasn't actually very good at that point. So, but it was the first real exposure to something that was round and concrete.
Yeah.
And that sort of lit my eyes up. I was just like, whoa, we can do stuff like this. And then, of course, we started getting magazines from the States, things like Skateboarder Magazine and those kind of things. And they were a huge inspiration. Obviously, we'd be taking photographs out of these magazines and we'd be saying, how the hell did he get into that position? And more to the point, how did he get out of it?
Yeah, because if you think back at the time, if you haven't seen it, and then you see still photos, they don't really give you any clues as to how you get into that position in the first place, or like what you have to do to get there. Like, it's quite weird if you think that you haven't actually seen this thing before. It's hard to imagine that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's why when the first PAL videos came out, it was such a revelation.
Yeah.
Yeah, because up to that point, everything had been still photographs. And of course, with it being print, it was delayed 6 months, maybe.
Yeah.
So whatever was going on, we first saw happened 6 months ago in the States. So there was a progression lag that was going on. It wasn't necessarily that, and don't get me wrong, I mean, they were phenomenal for the time. They were doing an amazing job of learning stuff. But we were trying to catch up in Britain. And I wasn't necessarily on the first wave of real sort of decent guys in Britain. That was sort of like the Signed Appers, the John Sabloskis, the Mark Sinclairs, all of these kind of guys. I came kind of just after that. And that was when a lot of the money had disappeared from skateboarding.
Yeah.
Any of the manufacturers, Benji boards and stuff had gone out of business. A lot of the paid skate parks were going out of business.
Right.
And that's when we went into this period that we called the Undead, which was basically 80 through to about 82-ish. There were probably, I'm not even joking, there were probably less than 500 skaters in the whole of Britain at that point.
Right.
And we all knew each other. So we'd end up traveling and going and staying with people.
Yeah.
So that's when I got to know a bunch of the London guys, because I used to go down there a lot and just hang out and skate and, the usual hijinks, tomfoolery, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it kind of accelerated for that. And of course, when I got into that, then contests started coming up. And I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to have a contest down in London at Crystal Palace. What do you think? Great. All right, let's go. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And at that point, also, the first real sort of skate tourists started coming over from the States. So like there were demos for like Stevie Caballero and Mike McGill. They'd come over.
Yeah.
And we'd meet them in London and take them to these places and go and skate with them.
So even in that slump, there was still stuff happening.
Yeah, very much so. At least from our, tiny little part of the world.
Yeah.
There was a lot of stuff happening. And we were just, we were just a bunch of kids. We were just having a great time. And I managed to pass my test and get a car. So that got us mobile. And we started just traveling. Just going places all over the place. We ended up in Scotland. We went down to Wales. We were down in London, like all the time. We just ended up meeting a bunch of these people and just skating with them. And all the time, you're getting better and better and better as you get exposure to all these different talents and people. And so I ended up doing reasonably well in skateboarding.
When you say reasonably well, what do you mean by that?
Well, I was in the group that included people like Sean Goff, Ian Cockin, Dave Furno, all those kind of guys.
Yeah.
All
those names that then went on to be snowboarders as well.
Right. Although, as I think he said in his podcast, he was really surprised that there weren't that many of the actual. This was stratified. There was like A group and B group skaters.
Yeah.
And there was a bunch of like A group skaters, and he was surprised that not many of the A group ones actually took to snowboarding. Which I kind of mirrored that, because when the first time that I knew that Ian was doing it was actually when I was coming back from one of my first Euro trips. I went to Westendorf in Austria,
Right.
and that was the first time that I actually got a real board, like a Burton Cruise, one of the 165s that felt like a brick.
Yeah.
And Salomon rear entry ski boots. Yeah, it was real styly time. But I bumped into Ian on the airport on the way back, and we were chatting about it, and that was the first time I knew that he was actually snowboarding. And I didn't know that David had worked setting up SS20 either. I kind of heard about it, but I didn't really know that he was getting into that. So
but
we're
jumping,
all sort of connected
that's
way.
jumping forward a little bit. Like what was your first or exposure to snowboarding, but kind of where was skating for you when you saw snowboarding?
All right, so you're going to see me looking left a little bit because I've got a bunch of notes.
I could tell that you've got some notes.
There you go. So when did I first get onto snow? 1982. There was a Sims ad in Action Now.
I've
magazine.
seen it. I've seen that.
You've seen it?
Ian Cocking's got that magazine, I think.
There you go. That's the one with the yellow Sims board with Caballero doing stuff on it.
Yeah.
We saw that and we're like, how? What? Where do we get one of these things?
Yeah.
So we started sort of figuring out what that looked like, and then we started tinkering around and making stuff.
Right.
And I was not great at it. I'd made a little plywood thing. It didn't really work very well. But some of our mates out at Cleethorpes on the coast near Grimsby, shout out to Graham and Tim, by the way, who were wonderful guys. Tim was really kind of getting quite advanced. He started laying up a board similar to the Burton Performer,
right,
but with fiberglass reinforcements. He even put some aluminium fins on it.
Right.
And we made like foot bindings by slicing out pieces of polyethylene from a barrel and molding them over into hoops and screwing them out onto the deck. So we made these kind of things and started to ride those whenever there was snow around, like 1 or 2 weeks a year in Britain.
Yeah.
We'd congregate places and go and ride these things. So that was really where that started in '82. And it didn't really get out to Europe for a few years later. But this was just tinkering. This was stuff like, wow, these guys in the States are doing this. This is awesome.
But I mean, aside from looking abroad and seeing people doing it in the magazines, was doing it on this handmade kit, like, did it give you that, like, the feeling enough to make you want to keep doing it? Because at that time you're pioneers, right? There's not really any other groups of people doing it. There's nothing to look at. There's no kind of other people to talk to about it. You're just doing this thing, and it has to give you that feeling to want to do it more. Exactly.
And that was, even though the stuff was super primitive, there was enough there that we knew that it felt amazing and we wanted to do it more, but we didn't know how to.
Yeah.
Because we didn't. I mean, we knew about the Alps, obviously, but the stuff over there. But this was back in the days where not just. I mean, Ski Sunday was still around there. But it was all very purely ski racing.
Yeah.
And we knew about these resorts up in Scotland. But do you remember CFAX and Teletext?
I do remember CFAX. Yeah.
Yeah. We'd always be looking there for the snow reports.
The snow reports, yeah. I used to
for
do
the Scottish ones, and checking out like, well, there's snow up there. Should we make a trip? I don't know. It's these kind of things going on, because it wasn't insignificant for us to go up there. We had to plan it.
That's a long way.
Because again, we were. I mean, 82. I was like 19.
Yeah.
So it was it was a trip. But anyway, it felt great. Even though it was primitive, there was enough there for us to think, we want to do something with this. But that kind of stuck in the back of my mind because I was mostly focused on skateboarding at that point.
Yeah.
because I was doing contest series. By that point, sort of 82, 83, I'd got sponsored. Goldwing Trucks over here had sponsored me. So they were throwing a little bit of money at me to go to different contests. And so I ended up doing stuff like Scandinavian Open contests in Denmark and Sweden and that kind of things. And,
Right.
French contests and a few others. And I was just having a blast with that. Met a bunch of guys over Europe, and of course they had some exposure to snowboarding as well. So, it started to snowball, pardon the pun. But it didn't really get into gear until a little bit later. But we'll get into that.
But I mean, like you're a sponsored skater, traveling to contests. I mean, that's living the dream to an extent, isn't it?
Was at the time. I mean, crazy stories. Yeah. There's a few, like we said, there was less than probably 500 skaters in the whole of Britain at that point.
Yeah.
Dave, Dave Furno, obviously.
I know. Do you know what? I'm not entirely sure I've actually ever met him. I know of him,
No?
of course.
Oh, wow.
I don't think our paths have ever actually crossed for a conversation. I'm sure it will. I'm hoping it will at some point soon.
The kind of stuff where, because he used to live in Coventry or Birmingham? Rugby. He used to live in Rugby.
Right.
And he had a motorbike, and he'd come up occasionally at weekends, and we'd have a bunch of people meet and just do stupid stuff. And one day, I remember Dave was, we found this spot that had like an S bend going down into a dip that if you were riding it fairly rapidly on a skateboard, it was actually fairly decent. But you had to get a run up into it. Right. So Dave was pulling people on his motorbike. So we were hanging on to his rack at the back, and he'd give us a tow, and off we'd go. There was a friend of mine, Paul, who's that's a whole sad story, but he's rest in peace. But he took one, got a speed wobble, took a sharp left, and literally ran through this woman's hedge. Never seen anything like it. Just ran straight through it. We were just like peeing ourselves laughing. And poor old Paul, he's like, luckily there was nobody in, but he'd left this, like, it was cartoonish. There was this human-sized hole in this hedge as he'd gone through. But yeah, that was, just an illustration of, we used to go and travel and just hang out with each other. Like, I'd go down to Coventry there was a guy down there called Steve. We skated this fountain thing that was in Coventry. Right. There were all sorts of little banks and stuff, and of course there was still the big skate parks that were lurking around, but most of them were either derelict or on the way to being derelict.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff. There was a skate park at Nebworth. I don't know if you heard of that before. At Nebworth Park.
No.
That was a big concrete one, and first time we rode it, there was actually a concert going on. Because they had big rock concerts there.
Of course.
And we went down there and we said, all right, well, we'll go to this concert and we'll go skate the place as well because it's right there. Of course, at that point, nobody had thought about anything like a hotel or a place to stay.
Of course.
So we got to this point, skated all afternoon. We're like, all right, where are we going to stay then? I don't know. Do we know anybody around here? Well, no. And we got talking to some locals. And this circles back to Dave again. We ended up sleeping the night in a chicken coop with the chickens. And Dave wakes up in the morning with a chicken square on his head because it was warm. And it was just nuts. Cars would. At the time, my dad was sort of running a second-hand car business on it as a side hustle.
Right.
And so I'd get a different car every few weeks because he was just like buying them, doing them up, selling them, and I'd get to drive them around a little bit at the time.
Yeah.
That was one of these things that at that particular one, we were coming out of this parking lot field and the exhaust just let go, just completely broke. And we're in the middle of a field. What do we do? So, we had to get creative. We were like slicing up Coke cans and tying them around this exhaust pipe with bits of wire. Just solid enough to get us home. So that was sort of normal stuff. It was what we just had to do because none of us had any money, and were driving around really crappy cars, and they were going to break. So it was just the way it was.
But I guess that gave you a little bit of a grounding towards kind of engineering and the sort of things that you got into later.
It did, and actually I came really full circle. I've got this little. I'll not plug it. I've got a little YouTube channel that I just do stupid
Plug
things
away,
with
man.
cars.
Plug away.
It's called Nuts and Knuckleheads.
Right.
And I do stupid things with cars, like try and repair them, and just stuff. But anyway, that's been something that's come up much more recently over the last few years. I've got much more back into that and been into sort of mechanic stuff and building things and definitely fixing cars, because basically being able to have them actually fixed by garages costs an absolute fortune out here. It's crazy. So
do you like tinkering?
Yeah, I do. And to the extent of not knowing quite enough that I need to, knowing enough to be dangerous.
Well, it means you're always learning as well, which is no bad thing.
I've got reasonable. I mean, I've done timing chain swaps and rebuilds and that kind of stuff.
Do you watch a guy called Matt Armstrong? He's an ex-pro BMXer.
No.
He's an English guy. He takes crash damaged cars, but like supercars,
right,
and fixes them up. Now
I'm gonna have to look him up.
I don't care about cars. Like I've got no interest in cars.
Yeah,
if it works, that's fine.
That's kind of where I'm at now.
But I find his channel strangely compelling, even though I've got no interest in it. The fact how he goes about it and how he presents it is fascinating.
Huh.
So
I'll have to look it up. No, I've not seen it.
I'll send you the link to that. It's quite cool, really.
Yeah, please, that'd be great. But yeah, but back then that was what we had to do. I mean, another example, I had this yellow Ford Escort Estate, ancient thing, and we four of us had gone down to London in it. Well, I say two of us from Lincoln had had to go up to Leeds to pick two others up, and then we'd gone all the way down to London because we were going down to a contest down there.
Yeah.
On the way back, this thing decided that it was going to lose all of its water, its coolant, and we were late trying to get back, so the thing would overheat, and so we'd have to find some water and put it in there, and then we'd go another few miles and it would overheat.
Yeah.
We were doing this all the way back up to Leeds.
Jesus.
And it was like 4 a.m, something like that. We'd done another stint. I was driving. I was absolutely shot, and all of a sudden I hear this. Wah! All the guys in the car had woken up because I was ploughing through bollards in, a roadworks.
Yeah.
And we decided that was the point where we needed to sort of maybe step to the side and maybe have a bit of a nap.
But that sort of that driving around and everything. That definitely echoes like how it was when we used to ride the dry slope.
Yeah.
In the kind of mid to late 90s, like we happily jump in the car, from Dartford, we'd drive up to Tamworth to ride there on a Saturday night. We'd get home at 4 a.m. because driving home from Tamworth at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
Or Telford for a dry slope. We just get in the car and go. Like there wasn't even a question of not going to. If there was something on,
right,
chances are we were going to it. Do you know what I mean? And it's nice to hear that was already a thing. It's kind of, obviously skating and snowboarding are cousins, but it's nice to hear that, people were doing that to go skateboarding, and sort of snowboarding just sort of echoed that, like a decade or 15 years later.
Yeah, it's there's definitely linkages there for sure. I mean, I'm not saying that we pioneered it by any means. It was just what we had to do.
Yeah.
If you wanted to do this thing and coexist like socially with all of the people that were doing it in the country, that there was no other option. You had to go and meet them and do stuff together.
Yeah, 100%.
And the same thing with the dry slopes. The one regret, or not one, just one regret that I do have is that when the dry slope scene was really starting up in Britain was pretty much when I ended up over here. Right, so I kind of missed it all. In terms of
you could say
that
you swerved a bullet as well. You'd probably your fingers work better now than they would have done.
Yeah, I did actually. It's not that I avoided dry slopes entirely. When I was, when was it? 2021, something like that. I ended up in the northeast in a university, and I there was a dry slope on the south bank of the Tees in the hills at the back of there. I went down there and was asking them if I could teach people. They weren't interested. But there was another dry slope in Silksworth in Sunderland.
Right.
And I ended up going there and said, look, I want to teach. I want to teach snowboarding. I want to spread the gospel, all this kind of stuff. This was after I'd got my first real board. And they said, well, I don't know. Here's the thing. If you can ski, then we'll let you teach snowboarding. Like, okay, that makes no sense whatsoever, but all right. So I had to learn how to ski enough to be able to teach that. So then they'd let me teach snowboarding. And that was on the dry slope there. So, I did end up putting in some hours on Dendex for sure. So I'm very familiar with the twisted thumb, the broken knee, especially the sprinkler up the arse.
Yeah,
that's a classic. And we used to. I'm sure you guys had the same thing with dry slopes, but every season at the start of it, before people would go away on their holiday trips, they'd turn up all in the new CNA gear.
Yeah.
And they'd be at the dry slope, and of course they'd end up going away with it completely shredded and waterlogged, and it was terrible.
CNA, I don't think CNA ski wear gets enough shout outs these days.
CNA ski wear, that was classic.
I mean, that was total. That was your rite of passage.
It was. I remember some of that stuff. I ended up with, again, flip flopping. My first trip out here, I remember I had a CNA ski jacket.
Nice.
That ended up getting totally ripped for one reason or another. But I was still snowboarding in it. I was at Stowe. I was riding in this damn thing, flapping around like it was nuts. But yeah, CNA stuff. It definitely doesn't get the shout that it needed to because nobody else was doing it.
No,
nobody else was doing it.
That was like your entry point into it, wasn't it? Because
exactly.
But jumping back a bit, I mean, obviously you've now at this point you've seen snowboarding and you've built. You've been building boards, but when did you first? So you mentioned going to Westendorf. Was that your first sort of seeing the mountains? Because that obviously that kind of there's snowboarding and doing it on and if you were doing it on dry slopes but hitting the mountains is if you've never. There are people in the world that haven't seen the Alps in their full majesty, and what. I'd fucking love to go back to that first time. Do you know what I mean? Because it's so sort of overwhelmingly amazing. So so paint that picture for me. Where did you go? How old were you?
So this would be refer back to my notes. Where would this be? 86 was when I first went to Westendorf.
Yeah. And what took you there? Like, what was the circumstances leading up to that?
At the time, I was married, and the wife wanted to go on a ski trip.
Right.
So okay, well, we'll go to wherever we can go cheap. So we ended up in Westendorf. And everything that you just said, absolutely mind blown. Like, just what the is this? This place is incredible. And it ended up buying a board straight away. That was the big old Burton cruise that I talked about.
Yeah.
And just rode the hell out of it. Just loved it so much. It was just, I'd ride until I couldn't walk.
Did you see, was there any other snowboarders on the mountain? Did you see
very few at that point? There were some, but it was very few. It was a very traditional Austrian ski village.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing stuff for the first time, things that stick in your head, from back there. I remember going up on a lift and seeing a bunch of Austrian kids lying astern skiing, and they were jumping over this road on the way back down.
Right.
Stuff like that. But just the being in the mountains there for the first time, it really shook something pretty deep.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I want to do this. I want to be in this somehow. So that was that. And I was still learning for sure, but I figured out the basics of snowboarding because I'm sure some other people have said this, but if you could skate reasonably decently, snowboarding wasn't that hard to pick up. At least not the basics.
Yeah.
Because the board's strapped to you, and you don't have all the different foot movements and all this kind of stuff, and you do have to figure out edges and carving and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the actual being sideways on a board going down something was pretty well locked in. So I had that going for me, but Westendorf was all about, okay, we've got this board now. Wait a minute, it's got a side cut, it's got this metal edge. What the hell do we do with this? And there were a couple of people that on hard boots and alpine boards.
Yeah.
And you're watching them, you go, oh, all right. So you got to bend this thing so the side cut goes in there. Of course, the analytics were coming in, so you got to bend it, be able to get this on light edge and zoom around like that, and eventually, it all started to click. The wife at the time wasn't happy. She was expecting just this ski holiday, and I probably just kind of took that over a little bit.
Yeah, well, fair enough.
But that was the first real exposure to it, and I've actually been back to Westendorf since then, just for nostalgia. And Nicola Tost lives there. She's the big star there, the Olympic one. She was one of the old Burton riders.
She was, yeah. That was kind of early 2000s, I think, was her heyday, wasn't it?
Yeah.
In the Mac Dog films. That's where she is, isn't it?
Yeah. She's. I think she still lives there.
Nice.
But yeah, that was my first real exposure to it. So yeah, it was. It kind of snowballed from there. Pardon the pun, but it did.
And what about skating? Was that then like, oh, actually, I found something else, or were you still sort of full force with your skateboarding?
No, I was still skating. Like '86. Well, you gotta think of the arc that was here. I mean, I first started competing sort of 80, 81.
Right.
And went all the way up. I mean, I guess my best ever result was I got third in the Scandinavian Open in 1984, I think it was.
Wow.
So from there, though, things started to decline. I mean, a bunch of different reasons. Like I said, the aforementioned wedding, I was getting older. There was a lot of stuff that was going on. And it just wasn't, I wasn't going to do it at that level anymore.
Yeah.
But I was still skating a lot. Like I said, I ended up in the Northeast and started hooking up with all of the crew that were up there. And they were also into snowboarding, but they were into things like building ramps. So like there was a giant vert ramp in Newcastle. It was steel surfaced, and they just built this thing because they wanted to. They'd seen the plans. This thing was massive. It was like 10-foot transitions, a foot of vert.
Wow.
And it was really, really nice. So we'd end up skating there all the time, and it was one of those things that kept it going. But because I wasn't in that contest part of it anymore, it kind of started to decline a little bit. I mean, I still skate to this day, and I try and find places around here that's a whole different story. But yeah, at that point, I was still skating, but not at that level. And I'd started to get interested in snowboarding a lot more, because around about then was when I really started connecting with the Doncaster guys, Dean Stepani and all those guys.
Dean Stepani, there's a name that pops up.
Yep. He's a very old friend of mine. He used to run this shop called Round Ocean in Doncaster. And it was a tiny little place, had standard skate thing, but it had this ramp in the back, and this thing was absolutely vicious. I mean, it probably had like 4-foot transitions and 3 feet of vert on it. It was crazy. We had some video. I have some video of it somewhere. But we go there and be riding that thing, and again with a skate shop, obviously you get to know people that were there. That's when I first met people like Russ Ward and Moon, his brother.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of the other Doncaster guys that would, again, we'll get into that in a bit, but I've been sort of interconnecting with the Donny guys for decades on various trips. And, one of the things that we did there was the aforementioned marriage was breaking down about 1990. They took me up to Scotland, So we ended up at Cairngorm, and also at Annickmore. We did both of those on the same trip. We were just having just a raucous blast. It was just so much fun because everybody had somewhat decent gear at that point.
Yeah.
And you could ride without getting miserable. So it was just wonderful.
Even in Scotland.
Yeah, it wasn't the best by any means, but we were just having such a blast we didn't care. But those guys, well, I mean, not brothers, but we were pretty close at one point.
Well, it must have been cool to then be, like finding fellow snowboarders, in a time when, again, that was before any magazines started in the UK.
Yeah.
Any snowboard magazines.
It really was.
To be finding people doing it must be a real joy.
It was an absolute joy. I remember one night I got a phone call. It's snowing up here. You got to get up. I was like, why? Where are we going? It's like, there's a golf course. We're going to go ride it. I'm like, all right. So I was in Lincoln. Doncaster's like 40 miles away.
Yeah.
So hopped in the car, went up there, and we ended up riding this golf course at night. Just tearing down this thing. And just having the hooting and hollering, just the time of our lives, just going down this thing. It was amazing. Yeah, they're a great crew, and they still are doing things this day. In fact, I think in 3 days' time, most of them are going to be out in Kutai. They were having a trip out there, which I dearly wanted to go to, but there was just no way I could do it.
Yeah, it's a long way for you.
It is. That being said, they have done another couple of trips that I did crash. Like I could forget the year, but it was in the early 90s, maybe mid 90s. They were all going out to Whistler,
right?
And they said, "Yeah, come on out." And I'm like, "Okay," because obviously they're thinking, we're in Canada. Why don't you just come out?" Not knowing they're 3,000 miles away. So I said, "Okay, all right." So I got on a plane, went out there, and eventually knocked on their door in the hotel at like 3 a.m. Then we ended up riding there for a few days together. So that was brilliant. And a couple of years later, we did the same thing at Jackson Hole. So ended up riding there with those guys as well.
Yeah.
And they're just such a really great bunch. Just a really down to earth, but just loving snowboarding, just like doing it for the pure fun of it.
Yeah.
And I miss those guys a lot.
So how, I mean, it's kind of there's people that like going snowboarding, and then there's the people that can't get enough of it. It becomes their life. Like, when did you sort of realize that kind of you wanted more out of snowboard, or like you wanted to be more in snowboarding?
Well, that it wasn't quite as linear as that for me. What happened was, again, like I mentioned, aforementioned marriage was on the rocks, so I ended up going to another course at the university. I graduated University of Sunderland Sunderland Poly as it was then, in '88, and I went back in like '90 and '91 to do this experimental class that they were doing, which was like a 1 year supposed masters in what they called business innovation.
Right.
And what that entailed was you had to present a business plan that you wanted to actually do something, and they had a grant that they gave you.
No way.
To be able to help you to start this thing off.
Yeah.
Completely experimental. They were trying it for the first time. The spiel was, do this, make it successful, you get a master's degree at the end of it. All right, sounds good to me. Got no other options right at the minute anyway.
Yeah.
So I ended up at this thing. So the first iteration of that was genetic fingerprinting had just become a thing. Right. So I was going to set up a genetic fingerprinting company. Of course, as soon as I got into the nuts and bolts of that, figured out I couldn't do that. My degree was in biotechnology, so I had some kind of understanding of things like digestion systems and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So the next idea was I was going to build a a home version of an anaerobic gas digester, so that you could produce your own gas for the house.
Okay.
Of course, that was way too complicated, so that didn't happen either. At this point,
No, but
I'd
you're
gone
thinking big. I like it.
Yeah, that's
Big
always been my
solutions.
problem, Chris. It's like I've never had any problem at all in thinking of ideas, especially big ones.
Yeah.
It's just like actually making them function is a whole different ballgame.
Well, that's the game, isn't it?
But then this was like late '91. Now at the time that had sort of fallen through. I was still on the course until like June of the next year. I still had this pot of grant money that I could do something with, as long as I could justify it. So I said, okay, well, I've got some experience in quality assurance, which is what I'd been doing like up until that point.
Right.
I know this snowboard company that could really use it. If I can get an in with those guys, can I use it to go out there in the States? Sounds good to me. Let's do it. So that was when I wrote to Burton the first time. And
so was that because you thought they did have quality control issues, or was it just like I want to go and work for them, I need an in, and this is my in?
It's kind of 50-50.
Right.
You know, I mean, I knew because of the connections and the people that I knew already that Burton was exploding at that point. I mean, 100% a year growing.
Yeah.
You know, so any kind of company that's growing at that rate is going to have problems. So I knew that there was going to be issues there. I just didn't know which ones.
Yeah.
I also needed an in and to be able to do something with this thing that would produce some opportunity.
Yeah.
So that's when I wrote off to these guys and said, look, here's what I'm doing. You guys are in this exploding growth phase. Why don't I just come out there and take a look and just, you know, see if anything comes of it. Didn't hear anything back.
I mean, when you say you wrote to them, this was a pen and paper letter.
Oh yeah, this is pen and paper letter. Didn't hear anything back. Thought, okay, well, you know, you give it a shot. Fair enough. A few months later, I get this this letter. Said, oh, thanks for your letter. Yeah, we're kind of interested. You know, can you, if you're coming out, can you stop by? Was literally how they phrased it.
Yeah.
I was like, wrote back, said, absolutely, sure, no problem. Why don't we do it in March in 92?
Yeah.
I said, all right, great, we'll see you then. So I used this money to get on a plane, went over there, and that started, I mean, I don't know how much in depth you want to get into that whole story, but that first trip was nuts.
Let's go in on this.
All right. So March 92, get on this plane, head over to Boston, rent a car, giant Buick, head north. No idea where I was going. This was in the days of paper maps, remember? Yeah. No Google Maps, no Apple Maps, none of that navigation shit. This was like paper map, here we are, we got to go, there. Eventually I get out of Boston, head north, get into New Hampshire, and it starts snowing. Right. And it starts snowing hard.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like it before. I'm like driving through 4, 5, 6 inches of snow on the highway, on the interstate. And it's late and I'm really shattered, like almost falling asleep. So I pull over in this rest area. I had gas stations and, you know, I had a little restaurant stuff, and I was pretty hungry, so I ordered something. And I was that exhausted that I actually fell asleep in it, on the burger, in the plate, like bump, like this. And I woke up, there was somebody just touching my shoulder going, are you okay? And there was this woman stood there, and I said, yeah, I'm okay, but, you know, I came up and I don't really have any place to stay. I'm just like heading north for this thing. And she said, okay, wrote some directions down, said, go 30 miles north, take this exit, 4 miles that way, take a left, up there, go up this mountain road. There's going to be a house with these particular doors. Go in that house at the back, go upstairs, find a bed, and go to sleep. All right. All right, whatever.
The Shining.
The Shining, exactly. I'm thinking I'm going to wake up like in pieces.
Literally in pieces.
Like, or the misery thing with the smashing your ankles against the block of wood, all that kind of stuff. I'm like, you know what? At this point, I don't care.
Fine.
So I did it, and I went there and literally found it was exactly as he said. Went up there, found a bed, went to sleep. Woke up the next morning, bacon and eggs going.
No way.
I'm just like, what the? Where? First of all, A, where am I? B, holy crap, there's bacon and eggs going. And C, look out the window and it's dumped.
Yeah.
It's like 1.5 feet or so. So I go downstairs and this woman's happily makes it, oh, yeah, you're awake. Great. And so I had breakfast and then left. And that just blew my mind. I was like, what the hell just happened? But anyway.
The kindness of strangers is what happened.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And, it was good that was the first sort of interaction with anybody up here, really.
Yeah.
So at that point where I was actually quite close to Killington. So I ended up driving to Killington that day and going riding there for the first real day. Now here's an interesting point that is going to come up later, so I just want to bring it here. I had enough money for either a lift pass or a motel each day that I was there. And I had a sleeping bag and a big car. So you can see where this is going.
I can see exactly where this is going.
Right. So I ended up riding, sleeping in the car. Riding, sleeping in the car. A couple of days later, I was up at Stowe. And because there's a line, a road that goes right down the centre of Vermont called the 100. And Killington, Sugarbush, Mad River Glen, Stowe, Smuggler's Notch, and Jay Peak are pretty much all on this line.
Yeah.
So I'd ended up going north from Killington, ended up at rode at Sugarbush, and then I went up to Stowe. I was in the parking lot at Stowe, and I was listening to the radio because this was one of the nights when I was going to be sleeping in the car. And I remember distinctly it saying, it's going to be a little chilly tonight. It's going to be -7, so you need to be making sure that you're really well wrapped up. And I remember thinking to myself, -7, I've camped out in less than that in the lakes. So about 3 o'clock in the morning, I wake up with hypothermia and then figuring out it's Fahrenheit, which is like minus brass monkeys, like something like -25 Celsius.
Sure.
I'd almost, if I hadn't woken up and turned the motor on and got some heat going, I'd have been in deep shit. It was that cold, your toothpaste froze.
Yeah.
I went to find a place to be able to, just basically pee in the morning and go and do my teeth and whatever. And I couldn't get any toothpaste out of this thing. It was It was like a block. So then I rode at Stowe. First interaction with that mountain. Oh my God, I loved it. Killington was just a big mega resort. There was a lot of good stuff there, but it was very wide open. And again, everything's relative. It wasn't anything like Europe.
No.
But for what we had here, it's fairly big.
Yeah.
Stowe's a different ball game. Stowe's it's got so much different stuff on it that there's no way you can cover it all at once. And especially if you go off backcountry or if you go, in through the woods. Yeah. There's just some amazing stuff there. So I ended up riding there for that one. Eventually, ended up going back south because they were in Manchester Centre at the time, which is down in southern Vermont, and it's fairly close to Stratton Mountain.
Right, of course.
Where the US Open was held.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and of course, I didn't even know at that point that the US Open was going to be this weekend, that I was going to be with Burton.
Right.
So I ended up going to Burton. They put me up in what they call the workers' house, which they basically rented this house for a bunch of workers that were working in the factory. Yeah. So they gave me a bed in that place for a couple of nights. Great. Did the couple of days at Burton. They said, awesome, look good. Here's a board, here's some boots, here's some jackets and clothes. some everything. I ended up with, I think it was a Kelly Air, some flex bindings,
Nice.
some ruler boots, a bunch of different jackets and stuff.
Yeah.
And that was sort of the payment for the day
Right.
that I did there. So I said, great, that's awesome. So what do you want to do? And they said, well, let's still, chew on all of this for a bit and we'll get back to you.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I said, but the US Open's on this weekend. You should really check that out. All right. So I go down to Stratton Mountain. And again, this was another one where I don't have any money left, basically. And I say, okay, what do I do now? Snowboard UK. I talked with Eddie at one point, Eddie Spearing,
Yeah.
and I'd sort of, we'd sort of interacted a little bit. And I said to the guys at Stratton, because they had a fairly big press operation there.
Yeah.
And because it was like a giant deal for them. So what they'd done was they allocated one of their on-slope condos for press.
Yeah.
So I went on to them and said, I'm writing an article for Snowboard UK on the US Open. Is there anything you can do for like a discount on accommodation or anything like that? And said, oh, no, you can put you up in the press condo.
No way.
So I ended up in this thing for like 2 or 3 days. The whole thing, the hot tub, the sauna, it was just incredible. And at the end of that, having been, sleeping in cars all the time, it was just bliss. And of course, there was the US Open going on, so it was like the first exposure to seeing like real, like top class competition going on.
Yeah.
Like Turye was there, and Brushy, and a whole bunch of those in the half pipe, and I was just soaking it all in, and I just loved it. I eventually ended up going back, and not much happened for a few months, and then I got a phone call, and I said, that stuff that you just did, can you come out and do a little bit more?
So what were you on that day or like the days when you were sort of looking around the factory, looking at their quality control? What were you looking for? What was missing?
Not to get too technical, but it's all about process control.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean, okay, if you're making 1,000 of these boards, if they're built to the way that they've been designed, they should all be the same.
Yeah.
When they come out, right? They weren't. There were all sorts of things like inserts in the wrong positions, or fins that were wrong, or bindings that were in a different position, or just even gouges and whatever stuff that was going on. And what they were trying to do was just kind of standardize the way that they made these things, so that they could go out without any of those problems with them.
Yeah.
So what I was doing was looking through all the different manufacturing processes, and figuring out where the problems were happening.
I mean, paint that picture. I mean, I've recently gone and built a board.
I saw the thing with Duke, yeah.
Yeah, and there's certainly there a lot of the process is it's not automated, so it is human led.
Yeah,
and obviously that then is difficult, or more. A machine will do the same thing over and over. Do you know what I mean? Because that's what it's supposed to do. Whereas a human, as soon as you introduce the human element, so what did their build process look like in terms of like what I might understand?
they'd started to work with ski technology at that point.
Right.
So this was at the point where Jake and Donna had gone over to Innsbruck and absorbed a bunch of stuff over there from some of the manufacturers that they still use to this day.
Yeah.
So they knew about molds, they knew about edges, they knew about base materials, they knew about cores, they knew about sidewalls, knew about inserts. So all the basics were there. But there's 2 or 3 steps to this, as you saw with Duke. There's, like that core that you made, for instance, that has to go through a planer to be able to produce a profile.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it has to have inserts put in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was an interesting part there about the sidewalls, but that's different. But all of those different processes have to be done in certain ways. Like with the core, it's fairly easy because you're putting it through a machine that should, if it's operating right, produce that core to the right template, the right thickness at different profiles, different points. If it's not operating right, or if it's screwed up, or if it's dirty, or if there's a problem with it, or whatever, it might not produce that. Then that's just one of the components. Then you've got the layup. I mean, you remember when you laid that board up?
Yeah.
And I think I remember asking you at one point, how did you register this particular part? Because I didn't quite understand the way that he'd done it. But there were registration parts all up through the mold that you had to have, and effectively there were just clamps all the way along this mold that were clamping the edge in place and the base. And you would then lay, the glass up, the core, the glass on top, the top sheet, get it all taped up. There was an aluminium top sheet for the solid mold. You'd tape it up all the way along, and then it'd go into the layup press.
Yeah.
And of course, then you've got the layup press, which it's a cooking press, so it's hot, it's pressure, but both of those things are very variable.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the way that you've got this thing laid up, and these are the technicalities that I worked out afterwards that people taught me, was there's a mile of difference between if you've got resin at specific points in this board and if you don't.
Yeah. And
so having a uniform resin layer in this, because they were using wet layup, it wasn't pre-preg at that point, it was wet layup. You had to get everything really wet to be able to make this thing work, but you couldn't have it too wet, otherwise it was going to be like a brick.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of variability in there that was human centered.
Right.
And you had to have people really trained to be able to do that. So that was the cause of a lot of variability in the thing, and even stuff like base materials. At the time, everything at Burton was screened. So it was literally silk screen, just like a skateboard, like different CMYK, all that kind of stuff. But of course, if they didn't let those dry for the right amount of time between each one of those colors, the bond to the base material was slightly weaker.
Yeah.
And if you multiplied that by the number of colors that were there, you'd get a different bond for that whole base material going onto the board than you would for another one that had maybe been left to dry longer.
Yeah.
And again, all this thing is a factory, so there's constraints, time constraints to be able to make this thing work. So all of that kind of adds up to, it's a complicated process, and you do have the big human element to making it all work, and there's tools in there to be able to make it somewhat standardized, but there's still an awful lot of variability.
And were they not seeing these things because they were so close to it? And obviously with other pressures on them, do you know what I mean? Like if you've got to make 500 boards or whatever by a deadline, then your goal is to make the 500 boards, not to make sure those 500 boards are exactly identical.
Exactly. There's a couple of parts to this. I mean, the first bit is exactly what you were talking about. We've got an order for 500 boards, we've got to get them out. Let's just ship it, get them out. And there was definitely a lot of that going on as well. There was a guy who was the manufacturing manager there, who, I don't know how much you know about manufacturing, but manufacturing managers and quality managers do this all the time.
Right.
It's like, ship it. No, you can't. Ship it. No, you can't. Ship it. All this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
This guy was French. He used to work for Rossignol. He's a guy called Joe. And he and I, at the start, we used to go at it all the time. Eventually, we got to know each other a lot and, really worked well together. But he had a very different philosophy on manufacturing. And a lot of that was just purely volume-based, as in, like, keep them going. Just keep shipping them out.
Yeah.
Now, what happened with that is that when you've got variability in the process and you keep doing that, what you end up with is a ton of rework going on because things fail and they have to be stripped down or something different has to be done with them. And that can happen at multiple points in the process. So if you've got boards going all the way through this, being reworked at different stages all the way through at different points in the process, you can imagine the number of boards that you've got in that place.
Yeah.
And that was what was happening. So we had to be able to start standardizing the process so that you could reduce the variability, so you could get less rework going on, so the number of boards going out would increase. And that was somewhat of a different mindset.
Right.
So that was one of the things that I had to really talk about.
So when they gave you a shout back after some months.
Yeah.
And
that
how
was
did
when
they approach that? Like, what were they asking you to do then?
They wanted me to go in and really do a deeper dive on the manufacturing process. There was a couple of issues they were dealing with at the time that were, causing them some difficulties. So they wanted to do that. They also, because this was just the first of 3 different gigs that I did that year in '93.
Yeah.
Did one in Burlington, because they'd moved up to Burlington at that point during that year. Because Manchester, the local thing, but Manchester, they used to nickname it as Zippy Vermont because there was absolutely zip happened there. It was just nothing. So they moved it north to Burlington, and it was a new factory. So they wanted me to be able to be there to help to set this thing up.
Yeah.
And so I helped them with that. Then they decided that they needed me to go over to Austria because they're one of the main distribution centers in Innsbruck. So I ended up in Innsbruck for a couple of weeks doing some stuff there. Similar kind of stuff, but also some basic quality stuff, like not that trip, but some later trips. There's, about base surface finish. If you've got
Explain
a base
what that is.
surface. So, well, I have to go back a little bit then, because there's 2 main varieties of base material. There's extruded and sintered.
Yeah, I know about those.
Yeah. So if you've got like especially a sintered one, if you have the final grind process in there and it's not controlled well, or you've got a belt that's old, or you've got different pressure on the rollers or something like that, it can be really kind of hairy. It'll come up with tiny little hairs on the.
So for the listener, I'm just going to explain the difference between extruded and sintered bases. So an extruded base is just one sheet of Is it PTEX? So it's a sheet of PTEX, whereas a sintered base is shredded PTEX that's then laid out, and it's got a more porous finish to it. So it contains more wax. From what I understand, it retains its glide for longer. Yeah, and it's harder as well, I think.
It is. It's a much harder construction. And a lot of that's because of the grade of PTEX that they use. The extruded stuff is generally a little bit softer. The sintered stuff has to be hard to withstand the sintering process.
Yeah. So
when they were working with that, where was I going with that? Crap.
You were just saying about if it's not ground right, it gets a bit hairy.
Right. So that's the surface finish. So in the final base treatment, they do a final base grind and then a final wax before it goes out. The combination of those 2, the base grind and the wax, produces a specific finish on the base, and that can vary a lot. That can be hairy, it can be a different color, it can be non-uniform across the whole thing. It can be all sorts of stuff, and customers were complaining.
Yeah.
So one of the problems that I had to solve, not on this particular trip, but much later, was how do we unify that over the Burlington factory, Austrian factories, Austrian distribution system, Japanese distribution system.
Yeah.
How do we unify that so that we get one base finish for a Burton board?
Yeah.
And it was relatively simple. I had to go to the factory, get 2 boards with identical base finishes, say, okay, do you agree that these are the same base finish? Yes. Okay. Sign both of these boards. Okay. Leave one of them there. This is your final inspection board. It has to be that or better to be let out of the factory.
Every time.
Take the other board to the distribution center. This is your incoming inspection board. When you've inspect boards coming in, it has to be that or better to be able to make it work. And just a simple thing like an actual standard,
right? Okay.
To be able to show what that was like was just one of the things that I ended up doing.
Seems kind of obvious in hindsight, but I guess if
A lot of
another
this
one of those
stuff
things
is,
that if
though,
you haven't
Chris.
seen it before, you don't know to do it.
Exactly. A lot of this stuff, it's not rocket science, the stuff that I do. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that it gets tech heavy, sort of like statistical.
Yeah.
There's there's a whole branch of this thing called statistical process control, which is like basically math. But some of the basics like that are fairly easy.
Yeah.
There was another one that I was doing when I first started there was, you remember when you were doing the core profile?
Yeah.
Well, Burton at the time were famous for doing a core profile that went thin, went thicker where the binding was, thin again, then thicker where the binding was, and then thin at the other end, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a lot more tech than that. But think about it. You've got these patterns for inserts that were maybe 4 different stance settings at each one of these thick points. But
so that was that was before the 3-hole.
Yeah. That was, well, no, the 3-hole one was the one that I was working with, the 3D.
Right.
But in each one of those positions, that core profile is increasing or decreasing.
Yeah.
So you've got to have a different size of insert in it.
Okay.
Because otherwise it sticks out.
Yeah.
Right?
I understand.
So we had multiple different varieties of inserts that you had to put into these things in the right configuration.
Yeah.
But they didn't have any system of keying them so that they knew which ones were going in where. So I ended up color coding it.
Yeah.
Saying pink ones go in there, green ones go in there, blue ones there, purple ones there. And that's how we ended up reducing that variability that was causing difficulties with the top sheet adhering in the right spot. Because the inserts would bump up.
Yeah, I understand.
Stuff like that was, it's relatively simple, but it causes real problems. So when after the 3rd gig, they called me and said, look, we like what you're doing. We think it could be really useful for us. Why don't you just come on over and we'll give you a job? So I thought about that for like about 3 seconds and said, yep, sounds good to me. Because at the time, the early 90s in Britain, there really wasn't a lot going on. Right. There wasn't a lot of opportunity for sure. Certainly the stuff that I was doing.
Well, I mean,
so
and as a snowboarder.
Yeah, I mean.
And you want a job, go and work for Burton. They're like,
it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, absolutely
exactly.
No-brainer.
So I ended up moving over in November 93. And boy, that was a different ballgame. I mean, Jake he's a central figure, obviously, in this whole thing. Amazing guy.
Did you get to know
Absolutely. Him? Yeah, not, we weren't close, but, he was basically my boss.
Yeah. Through
a couple of layers. He knew the stuff that I was doing and knew that it was important, but, I wasn't, there was a very structured hierarchy to Burton at the time.
Right.
There was a senior, like a director, vice president kind of level. And then there was sort of various directors and managers and stuff below that, and then the standard workforce. I was nowhere near the top. But the reason I'm saying that is because at the time, I remember I said a while back about the growth rate that it was going through, like 50 to 100% a year or so.
Yeah.
What I've learned since then is that it is just tailor-made for absolute chaos in a company.
Yeah.
As it grows. And what we were experiencing there was absolutely textbook stuff that was going on.
Yeah.
So that hierarchy that was involved in that, in reinforcing the culture inside Burton, it just evolved like organically. There hadn't really been any kind of thought to it.
Right.
I mean, maybe I'm being a little harsh there. Of course, there'd been thought to it, but it's like they weren't really dealing with some of the growth issues that were going on there.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I ended up understanding a little bit more was, you had to be able to deal with some of that stuff to be able to make the organization function properly.
Yeah.
So, and that kind of tied in with quality on a whole bunch of different levels. So
I was going to say, when you're sort of, as well as looking at sort of manufacturing processes and things like that, do you end up looking at how the whole thing's run and who's responsible for what, and Do you know what I mean? Like, it can't just be the manufacturing process; it has to be like the culture of a place and think.
It does, and certainly that was the way that I did it. There were some people there that were not there, but there's some people in the quality industry that would just go there and they would do what I call quality engineering.
Yeah.
Where they fix a problem. That's it. Fine. I work a lot more holistically than that. I'll work with a company and say, okay, well, here's the issue that you're seeing, but what's that a symptom of? And start to backtrack and figure out what that looks like for the whole organization.
Yeah.
Which I don't think was really where they wanted to go with it, but that was just the methods that I used. One of the things that we did. Are you familiar with ISO 9000?
Actually, I know a little bit about ISO stuff.
Yeah,
from a while back.
There's this quality management standard called ISO 9000, and it's international, obviously. One of the things that we'd said at Burton was that we could structure the quality system so that we could eventually get accredited to ISO 9000. There's this certification system that you can use.
Yeah,
and that laid the framework of everything that we were trying to do there, eventually to get this accreditation.
Yeah.
And the reason we were doing that was because if you could be certified to that, you demonstrated that you had that sort of level of consistency and quality that you needed to be able to produce stuff in the right way.
Yeah.
So that was the point. It took 4 years to actually take them to that point where they could be accredited to that, and we did eventually take them through that in 1997.
That's a lot of work.
So they got the certification for that. But along the way, oh my gosh, I mean, so many different things. You talked about, culture. There was no real supervisor training program,
Right.
so I wrote one, and it was all about. It was based on some issues that had been having there at some time. You remember when we were talking about Duke and I said about the sidewalls?
Yeah.
At the time, the construction there was that they had either polyethylene or ABS TPU sidewall. The polyethylene ones were first. Problem with polyethylene, if you try and stick it with epoxy, the surface doesn't take it.
Right.
Even if you press it and heat it up, it doesn't take it as well as it should do. So you end up trying to sand it to get more surface, all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
What we figured out at Burton, or they figured out, not me, is that if you activate the surface with heat, like a flame,
Yeah.
it produces an oxide layer on there that then will bond with the epoxy.
Actually,
Problem
that's something that my brother didn't film on at Duke, is that we flamed the core and the sidewalls.
There you go. Yeah.
Before layup.
Yeah. That's exactly why.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to activate the surface so that the epoxy will stick better to it.
Yeah.
Problem is when you're doing that with a sidewall, especially with it being a different, because remember at the time now, it's slightly different construction than the one you had. They profile sidewalls just like they did the core. Right. Slice them up and staple them to the sidewall in the right orientation.
Okay.
So to the core rather in the right orientation. So if you was putting these profiled pieces of plastic basically through a flame, so many different points along that as variable. Mm. So you would end up with if something was different, like if the gas pressure was different, if the heat was different, if the positioning was different, all these different variables, if they were off in the wrong combination, it wouldn't stick. Yeah. And you would end up delaminations in the factory.
Yeah.
At one point, we ended up with something had gone wrong. We don't know what it was, but there were hundreds of boards in the factory just delaminating.
No way.
And they all had to be reworked. We had to go back in and rework them all. Nobody could figure it out what was going on. But of course, this flaming process was so unpredictable that you couldn't really figure it out. So we had to, we had to start working on the actual process parameters themselves and figure out how we could vary them so that it could be more sustainable.
Yeah.
I used all of that to produce a supervisor training class.
Right.
That was like, here's the issues. What do you deal with it? How would you work with your team to be able to do that? And be able to basically take people through how to become a better supervisor at that point.
Yeah.
Of there. So stuff like that.
And what was it like? What was it like working at Burton? I mean, you kind of get the impression it must have been a fun place to work. Cool people, snowboarding, like in the evenings, weekends, beer, like free kit, all the perks. What was it actually like?
You got some of it right. Burton, this is my opinion, Burton at the time was structured. Burton was a worldwide brand, and it was a really cool brand.
Yeah.
So it attracted a lot of interest from really bright people who wanted to work there. The whole place was geared towards getting those really bright people in, throwing them massive amounts of responsibility, and seeing if they could handle it.
Right.
If they could, they went different places in the company. If they couldn't, they were out. Right. It was harsh.
Yeah.
And I saw tons of people who came in, didn't make it, out. Just like that. The people that were there when they, Jake was always, certainly when I was there, his famous saying was, he would take a really good snowboarder over somebody that was technically competent any day of the week.
Right.
And that was how the place was run. It's like, you need to be a snowboarder, because that was the culture that had been evolving there.
Yeah.
So what that actually meant was that almost everybody there was a really hardcore snowboarder.
Right.
One of the perks that you got for working there was actually a season pass to Stowe.
Sweet. So
everybody used to go to Stowe to ride, at the weekends especially, but quite often during the day.
Yeah.
We had this thing called the 8-inch rule. Like, if it snowed more than 8 inches any one night, nobody was in the factory the next morning.
Love that.
And it was just expected.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you might as well accept that shit, because if you don't want people phoning in sick when they're clearly going snowboarding, do you? That's just,
people are gonna go. There was this crew, because it was a 3-shift manufacturing operation at that point, and the third shift, the night shift, amazing bunch of guys. I have still no clue how they did what they did, but the way they would work was they'd go in at like 10 or 11 at night, work until 6 or 7 in the morning. Go straight to the mountain, go ride for 4 or 5 hours there, come back, eat something, go to sleep, and rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
They were one of the crews that I ended up hanging out with at the mountain a little bit. There were a bunch of other ones as well, but when you get to Stowe, there was very much not so much a gang mentality, but more sort of a cultural thing where you would connect with some people and then you'd end up riding together. Right. But it was, the best way I can describe it is it was like border cross.
Right.
You'd end up as a pack screaming down the mountain.
Yeah.
And just hitting whatever hits that you could possibly do all the way along there. I mean, Stowe's, what, 2,500 feet, maybe it's a little less of vertical. I mean, we top to bottom that in 6 minutes.
Yeah.
It was fast. And you had to learn how to ride at that speed, because otherwise you couldn't keep up.
Yeah.
So that was what we did. You ended up screaming down this mountain, absolutely hairballing it all the way down. But these guys were amazing riders. I mean, I've seen guys there that were easily pro standard, that were, manufacturing guys. No, that's what they did, and they were just like incredible on the mountain themselves. So yeah, it was. That's the part of the way that it was reinforced. Is that you're a snowboarder. We're going to take you snowboarding. We're coming out to Stowe. Let's go.
Did you get a discount, or did you get some free stuff? Like, how does it work? How did it work?
You got discount. It was different for hard goods or soft goods. You got, I think it was 50% off soft goods. You got 40% off hard goods, I think it was.
Right.
And probably the coolest part, though, was the warranty cave. There was a bunch of stuff in this room that was for warranty, and you could basically borrow stuff from there
Right.
anytime you wanted it. So like that's why you could get to ride every single board that Burton made, every binding, every boot, all of it.
Yeah.
And you do that, or at least I did. You know, I went up there and I was riding so many different things all the time. For one reason or another, I spent a couple of years on a twin 47. I absolutely loved that thing.
I know.
But anyway,
I know exactly
digress.
what board you're looking.
Yeah, it's basically a 147, but it was a standard twin. But there was, and some of the things were experimental, like they'd try different materials. There was a 47 that I had once. It was famous in Burton. They called it the Widowmaker. It was instead of the top sheet being standard ABS.
Yeah.
This thing was this material called Suralin, and they'd laid this thing up, and it made it really twitchy but damp at the same time.
Right.
And I loved that thing. You could rail calves on a 47, a twin, on this thing so easily. That was when they were starting to bring cat construction in as well.
Right.
So there was a whole bunch of different things involved in that. But yeah, the warranty cave was brilliant. You know, if you wanted to try something different, just go on. Oh, you got one of those rippies? Yeah, there you go. Give me that for the weekend. I'll bring it back on Monday.
What was the favourite like in production board that you rode of a Burton board?
I love the customs. I really love the supermodels.
Yeah.
Actually, do you want to see some? I've got some in the basement.
Not right now. You can send me some photos.
Whatever. I'll
that
send
I
you
can
some
put
photos
up with this on the YouTube. But
right.
Visuals are a bit lost on a audio only podcast.
Yeah, I hear you. I forget that. I really love the supermodels. I've got a supermodel 62 downstairs that I still ride. I always say that it's a Cadillac. It's just like it's a great board just for cruising fast. Mm-hmm. Love those. I love the balance. I've got one of those downstairs as well. That was awesome. There's a couple of what Burton was really good for at the factory, especially in the development process, was making what I call Frankenboards.
Right.
So there'd be, say you wanted to try, like one downstairs, one of the last boards that Craig was involved with was something called the Omen.
Yeah.
And it was basically an evolution of most of his boards. I've got one downstairs that has got like I think it's a Charger top sheet and a completely different base material, but the core profile and all the rest of the materials in there are an Omen.
Yeah.
We used to do that a lot. There was a lot of boards out there with just black top sheets with no graphics.
Right.
They were always
black tops.
Yeah, they were always prototype boards.
Yeah.
So you'd be riding those as well. And the cool part that I really loved about it is that they really took the feedback seriously. It's like we'd go out there, we'd ride. I mean, for God's sakes, I'm a guy from Britain, and I'm just riding whatever I can do, and I'll give them some feedback on that, and they would take it seriously and be like, "Oh, that's interesting."
That is interesting because a lot of people, it's just down on the team or. I've always thought that, like when it's like, designed by the team, I think, well, the team are an elite bunch of people with very specific needs, whereas to build board, like this is how I felt when I was working at Airwalk, it was like they were talking about, we've just taken feedback from the kids at Hood, and I'm like, but it's not the kids. The kids at Hood aren't going to go and buy these boards. Like you need a wider sort of test audience really to get feedback for the people that are actually going to go and buy them. It seemed a bit redundant to kind of just be asking a very specific demographic about a whole range of boards.
Well, exactly. And, that was one of the strengths that we had at Burton was because almost everybody rode and everybody rode reasonably well.
Yeah.
You could learn how to discern these things. It's like you could feel a different core profile. I mean, I'm not as good at it now, but certainly back then, I could feel if a core profile was different. I could feel if the side cut had changed. I could feel if the edge material was different. Those kind of things. and they took it seriously. You know, all of that went into a melting pot, and they came up with new stuff that made sense.
Yeah.
Have you heard of a guy called JG?
No.
John Gurn?
No.
Absolute guru. He was the head of the testing program.
Right.
And he could, I mean, I think he was a wizard. He just knew how a board performed without even riding on it. It was just, you know, he had these tests. I don't know if you've seen, obviously flex tests, you've seen that.
Yeah.
But he had this other one that where you grabbed hold of it at the contact points,
Right.
hold it about an inch above the ground, dropped it and grabbed it again.
Right.
And you could tell by the frequency of the vibration that was going on with that board what it would ride like.
No way. That is some fucking bodhisattva kind of move, isn't it?
I mean, it's like I kind of got it, figured it out, you know, so at least some of the basics of it. But, geez, yeah, I mean, you know, there was that kind of level of involvement going there.
Yeah. So how long did you stay at Burton for?
5 years. Yeah, 93 to 98. I took them through the ISO 9000 thing in 97. And 97 through 98, I ended up doing crazy shit. Oh, my God. But Burton at the time, people were traveling so much, they had an in-house travel agent. So I'm not even kidding. It's like everybody had to book the flights through this in-house travel agent who was there.
Amazing.
I ended up having to do 2 round-the-world trips.
Right.
One of them in 7 days. So, like, I ended up flying to Britain, see folks here, flying to Innsbruck, did some work there, flew all the way around back to Japan to go do some work on the distribution center there, and then back over to Vermont. So that was the first one. The next one I had to do was Innsbruck, go to China. This was one where I had to go to Hong Kong because that was British at the time. So I don't know if you've ever done this before, but at a hotel room, somebody shows up and says, "Oh, great, give me your passport and I'll come back with it." I'm like, why? Okay. That was what had to happen in Hong Kong to get a visa to go into China.
Right.
At that point. So this guy turns up, said who he was, gave me my passport, and I'm like, I'm never going to see that again. But yeah, he turns up with a visa, and we end up on a train going up to Guangzhou, where we were working with a boot factory.
Yeah.
And you know, it's China in the early 90s. There's chemicals in there you don't want to be anywhere near.
Yeah.
But we ended up doing some work with those guys to be able to help with some difficulties they'd been having. And we flew up to Shanghai, did a similar kind of thing up there. Now, there was a boot factory up in close to Shanghai that was run by Koreans.
Right.
And they had their own Korean chef there that made food for them.
Yeah.
So, of course, you're part of this team. You got to eat what they eat. So I ended up sampling kimchi for the first time.
Right.
This thing. So anyway, I ate this, so did my work, said thank you very much, off we go. Left China, went to Japan, did 1 day there, then left Japan, and at this point, somehow, still don't know how, I'd managed to wangle 2 days in Hawaii. So I went from Japan to Hawaii just to hang out.
Yeah. Nice.
Because I wanted to see the North Shore and go the whole surfing thing, by the way, we've not even covered that.
Why wouldn't you want to do that? That's the question.
Yeah. So, but as soon as I hit Hawaii, all hell breaks loose in my guts. I'm spending a day on the toilet because this kimchi had found its way through, and that was it. I was just like, oh my God. Eventually, I ended up being able to go up to the North Shore and swim where pipeline is and all this kind of stuff, and then I made it back. When I got back, I landed in Boston. My new wife, picked me up. We went straight to the Wang Theatre to see the Nutcracker. Right, picking me up. Within 10 minutes, I was laid out doing this business because I was just exhausted. And that was kind of the pace.
Yeah.
That you ended up doing, you know, that was extreme. I mean, there was some times where you'd wake up and you'd say the first thought would be, which country am I in? but that was just the pace of what you did.
And I guess it was at the time where you had to go and do things. Like you couldn't
Right.
just have a conversation like we are now across the world. Do you know what I mean? Like if you needed to go and explain something to someone, you had to actually go and explain it to them.
Exactly. It was exactly that. And that's why we had the in-house travel agent, because people would, if there was a problem, get on a plane, go fix it.
It's fucking
That was
wild, isn't it?
that was the the standard method.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what made you leave Burton in the end then?
Well, eventually, I mean, I've been there for 5 years, and I'd done a lot. We'd taken them through what we needed to do with the ISO 9000. It got to the point where I was thinking, okay, well, what's next?
Yeah.
And there's also there's a legal component to this as well. Like when I first went over there, I was sponsored on an H-1B visa.
Sure.
You can get that extended for another few years. Then you apply for a green card.
Yeah.
Once you've got your green card, you're basically a resident. But that takes time. I was coming up to my green card in sort of 98, and I was thinking at the time, okay, well, part of the problem with that system, which a lot of people don't understand, is that that's all employer based.
Right.
So you're stuck with that employer all the way through that that program.
Yeah.
For better or worse. As it happened, I was perfectly happy, but a lot of people end up stuck in that thing. I knew my green card was coming up, so I was thinking, okay, well, I can either stay here or I can try and look for something different. And at the time, I wanted to get better in the snowboard industry. I wanted to make some things happen.
Right.
I had a lot of ideas, and I'd spent enough time in the trenches at that point that I thought, okay, well, I want to do this. I was out at Vegas at the trade show, and met some of the guys from this tiny little step-in binding company called Switch.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Switch. There you go, these guys.
Switch.
And
I was
there you
listening
go.
to Matt Barnes talking to Axel Poporte. I think did he ever go on Switch?
He did. He was one of the main riders. I've got a pair of his boots downstairs.
Have you?
Yeah, they're falling to bits now, actually, but what can you do? So anyway, I got talking with these guys, and they were really interested in some of the stuff that I'd been doing at Burton, and because they'd been experiencing a different thing, a similar kind of thing as well. They were fairly small, but they were punching way above the weight.
Yeah.
And obviously Vans had taken the system as well, so they were producing boots, Switch were producing the bindings. So Vans were kind of linked with these guys. So anyway, they eventually made me an offer, and I thought, okay, well, all right, let's do this. So they made me an offer, and I ended up going out to San Francisco, where they were based. Tiny little office. It was in a warehouse district in the South Market, and no heating. I've got some pictures of us all wearing jackets and stuff because in the wintertime, inside.
Yeah.
Of course, it's in an earthquake zone. I've never been in an earthquake before. One day, the place starts to rumble. Before I could even look up from my computer and say, what the hell was that? They'd gone.
Right.
They were out in the street. Everybody was there. This was, I don't know, I'll throw some names at you. Do you know Bryce Knights?
Bryce Knights. Yeah, I know the name, yeah.
Skateboard photographer.
Yeah, that's right.
Tony Guerrero was Tommy Guerrero's brother.
I've heard of
he was
Tommy
there
Guerrero
as well.
Yeah.
Tommy Guerrero was one of the original Bones Brigade from Powell.
Sure.
So there's a bunch of these guys there, just like I said, punching way above the weight, doing an amazing job with these bindings. They're still one of the best engineered bindings I think were ever on the market. The boots, a little different, but the bindings definitely were top notch. And I ended up working with those guys for a couple of years, basically trying to standardize the development through production process.
Yeah.
Like one of the things that was always a problem at Switch was there'd be a deadline for sending the actual final designs through to a manufacturer to be able to produce 50,000 units or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And there would always be stuff like, well, wait a minute, if we can wait 2 days, I can have this next bit designed and put in there and we can make it so that it's really, really cool. All of that started to stack up.
Yeah.
And so things were starting to be late. And as you know, in snowboarding, you've got that much of a window to sell stuff at top price.
Yeah.
If you're outside of that, forget it. So that was starting to be a real problem, and I ended up working with those guys to be able to help them to figure that out. Then Vans bought Switch. That was a whole different ballgame, because Vans at that point they were really kind of corporate, which surprised me.
Right.
But they were. They were run by a couple of guys, the Schoenfelds, and they were really just trying to get this company to the point where they could sell it. So, it was very corporate. But that being said, I went down to LA every couple of weeks or so, and I actually loved it there. I liked it much better than San Francisco.
Right.
But it got to be obvious after a while that the pathway that I thought I was going to go on wasn't going to happen. And I decided that we kind of missed Vermont. The weather was not great in San Francisco.
Right.
It's almost like Britain, to be honest. So, I didn't really fancy that too much. And so we moved back. The condo. Vans had a condo up at Tahoe.
Right.
Tahoe was like 3 hours drive from San Francisco, which was basically for the team riders, if they were going up to Tahoe. Of course, the team riders hardly ever used it, but we had this condo for the season. So we'd end up going up there every weekend.
Nice.
To go riding. We rode at like Homewood and most of the resorts that were around there. But yeah, we got to Tahoe. Sugar Ball was another one we used to ride.
Sick.
But we had this condo that was just there, so we took full advantage of that.
Well, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, of course. Why wouldn't you? So yeah, that was it was a fun time.
But then I guess the whole, at the time, the step-in thing didn't really. There was Clicker, Burton had a crack at it, didn't they? And then obviously Switch, but none of them really stuck, did they?
No, not really. That was a whole other side thing on the Burton one. I ended up doing the final quality engineering on the step-in.
Oh, really?
The first iteration of the step-in.
Yeah.
It was actually being made in a factory in Iowa, and I ended up out there for a couple of weeks, actually helping them dial in the production process. And it was really important with that one because the mechanism that it worked on was based on like a camming mechanism.
Yeah.
So it would go over a pressure point and then go back into on the side of the boot.
Yeah.
The force that was involved in that was really dependent on how well shaped these different voids were in there that rollers worked in.
Right.
And they had to be controlled very, very tightly. Like most plastics bindings and stuff, when you do plastic injections, if they're not fiber reinforced, there's a shrinkage factor about 3-4% usually.
Right.
That you calculate for final dimensions. And that can be quite variable depending on what they do in the injection molding process.
Sure.
With the step-in, they were using a short fiber reinforce. I think it was nylon or Lexan, one of the two. But that had to be super precise. Otherwise, this camming mechanism potentially could pop out.
Yeah.
And of course, you can't have that because it's a step-in. And if you're doing 40 miles an hour down a board, the last thing you want to do is have your feet pop out.
Exactly.
So I had to go and help them to really nail that down. So I was out in Iowa for a couple of weeks doing that. So I've been sort of in the step-in realm for quite a while, one way or the other. That was how I ended up in Switch, because I'd had that experience with the Burton step-in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, it was just a crazy time.
So when you came back over to the East Coast, what did you do then? Did you step outside of snowboarding?
Not outside of snowboarding, outside of the industry.
Right.
I'd kind of done what I needed to do, and I took some of the stuff that I'd been developing with quality, and I joined a little organization that was effectively a state-run consulting organization.
Right.
Or actually, it was a part of a national organization. And I ended up helping manufacturers all the way around Vermont. I worked with over 100 companies in 7 years.
Nice.
Everything from mom and pop shops making drumsticks halfway up a mountain all the way up to the scale of like IBM making silicon chips, everything in between. And that's where I really cut my teeth on things like the Toyota production system, lean manufacturing, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Was it hard to step out of the snowboarding industry though? Like, was that a big decision?
It kind of was. Given my choice, I would have loved to have stayed in it.
Yeah.
But the opportunity just wasn't there.
Right.
You know, the way that it was evolving, it just wasn't there. So I had to do something, and I figured that we really wanted to be back on the East Coast.
Yeah.
You know, it was a very different feel out in California.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that came calling, and then, you know, my wife got a job there, and then I got a job, and that was it. We settled down and had our first kid, and just basically made that work.
So how is snowboarding for you these days?
Well, during the season, I try and get there at least 3 times a week. I was up there this morning. I had a powder dump. It was massive.
And when you
So that
say
was
there,
really fun day.
where's there for you?
I live about 30 minutes away from Bolton Valley, which is a small independent resort.
Yeah.
Like maybe 1,600 feet of vertical, something like that. But the majority of things on the East Coast, it's hard to describe for people that are used to Europe, because, you know, European mountains are it's just
Fucking
white,
massive.
just massive.
Yeah.
Here it's all about trees.
Yeah.
Everything's below the tree line. So, you know, you have trails cut into them, but in between all of that is a bunch of different stuff that you can do in trees. And that's where things get interesting. Yeah, so I've had my difficulties with that, to be honest. So once, almost 10 years ago now, another powder day, ended up powder drunk. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Not often enough, sadly.
I know. Made the cardinal mistake. Followed a pair of ski tracks into the woods. And just kept going. And kept going. And it was flattening out, and I'd have to get off and hike a little bit and then get back on and go down some more and then flatten off and hike it. Did that 6 or 7 times. Absolutely exhausted. I mean, up to your waist, powder.
Yeah.
Hiking through all of that. And it was getting dark. It was getting like 4 or 5 o'clock at night. I just realized at that point, I have no clue where I am. I don't know where I am at all.
Yeah.
So I pulled the ripcord basically, and called I sent my girlfriend my coordinates, told her to send those to the Bolton Ski Patrol. I tried to call the Bolton Ski Patrol, my cell phone, which of course was dying.
Yeah.
They finally managed to get somebody out to me for a couple of hours and get me down there. But that kind of that really put a damper on a lot of things for me. I'm much more careful about going into stuff like that now.
But I mean that's an age thing as well, isn't it? Kind of.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, I'm much more careful about it now.
Yeah.
You know, I don't go on my own into stuff like that. It's just you know, stupid. But you know, you make these mistakes and hopefully you learn from them.
Yeah. Well, if you live to learn from them, then you're all good.
Well, exactly. You know. Let's try and think of some other stuff. I mean, that's where I'm at right now. I ride there most of the time. I try and get to other resorts as I can, but to be honest, I mean, Bolton's 30 minutes away.
Have you seen the place? I've only seen it on Instagram. I got shown it. A place called Hatley Point. It's like this couple. I don't know if you're anywhere near it, but I definitely think it's definitely on the East Coast.
Yeah.
And it's basically, I think this couple bought a derelict old ski area, like ski resort, and they've been doing it up. And it's just quite a fascinating thing. Why watching, you know, given all the, you know, climate change and the expense of it and all these kind of things, that somebody's like, no, we're going to invest in this and make something cool. I find that quite a fascinating sort of equation.
I've seen it. I haven't been there, but I know what you mean. I've been following it as well, and I'm exactly the same mindset. I'm just like, what the hell are you doing? You know, there's the amount of money they're putting into that to be able to make that work. I can't get my head around it. because there's no way it's going to be a profitable enterprise. There just can't be.
No.
Unless they I know they're trying to do it as a really upscale resort kind of a thing. But that all gets us into the whole discussion about Vale and the way that the Epic Pass is like completely decimated locals and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's been really bad out here.
I mean, that's something we
the
haven't
Epic Pass.
really talked about. I talked about it a bit with Martin Drayton because obviously he was talking about the
Yeah.
expense of it, like how much his time gets charged out to people and the lift passes and everything like that. But I guess most of our guests are still sort of Europe based, and it's still, it's it's an expensive hobby, obviously, an expensive pastime for sure. But, kind of it's still doable. But I think if your European resorts look at the way America's going and think we can have some of that, then I think there's trouble ahead.
It's a recipe for disaster. It really is. I mean, just even the basics. Stowe. When I first came out here in '93, a lift pass was $50 for a day.
Yeah.
Now it's almost 300.
Wow.
For a day. An Epic Pass for the season, if you get it at the right time, you can get it for about $800 or $900.
Yeah.
Of course, they're driving season pass sales, but the problem with that is that it overloads the mountain, especially with something like Stowe, where it's just on its own.
Yeah.
As soon as there's a powder day, forget it. No, you don't even want to get anywhere close to that place.
Yeah.
Because it's just a zoo. And that's the way that it's going out west. I think it was one of the Colorado resorts is $330 a day or something.
Yeah,
who can afford that? It just doesn't make any sense. So that's one of the reasons why I support Bolton, is because they keep it real, they keep it in somewhat of a reasonable financial area.
Yeah,
and they really care about the local scene. That's another part of this whole thing that I think is really, really important. Bolton has programs for all of the local school kids.
right.
So like the school kids will, because they have night skiing up there.
Yeah,
the school kids will go up there on school buses like every night.
Mm-hmm.
Different schools will go up there different days, and they have programs where they can affordably rent stuff. And not that you need to rent stuff, really. Teach them, chaperone them, make sure they're safe, all of this kind of stuff. There's another little place that's about like 10 miles away from me called Cochrane's, which is it's run by the Cochrane family. They've produced 3 Olympians
right.
On their own, and this is basically just a back hill with a button lift. And what they're famous for is producing slalom races,
right?
Because they train up there all the time. But again, the school kids all go to that place. And that they do programs like on a Friday night, they do a special where you can get a $5 lift ticket and you can go and eat stuff as well.
Wow, that's cool.
Just for like 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah.
And it's a fairly reasonable slope. It's bigger than most of the dry slopes in Britain, and certainly bigger than most of the snow domes.
Yeah.
So stuff like that helps to generate it, and I feel that that's being really ignored right at the minute.
Yeah, that's not the headline story, is it? But I guess if that's talked about more, then maybe more areas will see the sense in doing it.
I hope so. It's especially here where everything's driven by the almighty dollar. It's tough to not be carried along with that. But if they're really smart or in any way got any kind of a soul, they have to realize they've got to generate their own market.
Yeah,
sure. And that's what they're doing with the school kids.
Yeah. Well, and who knows where the next Shaun White, where's he coming from?
Exactly.
Certainly, if you look at, kind of America haven't got the, if you look at the competition circuit, like X Games and that, America hasn't got the hold on it that it used to have.
No.
Look at the Lax Open. The top 3 pipe riders were from Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Exactly.
I don't know about the slopestyle because I didn't see that. But, you know, if you look at the X Games, you know, like they haven't locked out all the podiums like they used to.
Right. And I think that's kind of sad. It's
Yeah.
I think they've let that go, to be perfectly honest. I think that there's always been talent here for sure,
Yeah.
but the way that it's been developed, I don't think has been good. Other countries have by far surpassed it.
Yeah.
You know,
All right.
so it's unfortunate.
Let's
Talking.
well, look, we've been going for a couple of hours now, so let's
God, so we have, yeah.
let's get into the end game of it.
All right.
Can you sum up what snowboarding means to you and has meant to your life?
I can, and I'm going to get a little bit poetic, so you're going to have to bear with me.
Great.
I've always had this thought, more so just recently as well, that snowboarding to me is three things. It's the gym, it's the church, and it's the therapist. You know, one of the things that just this morning happened was I get those moments sometimes where you just stop, everything's completely still, and you're out in the mountains, in the trees, with the snow, and somehow, I mean, I'm not a religious guy, but somehow you feel connected to something higher.
Yeah.
And that happened just even this morning. Like I said, you know, gym, church, therapist, it satisfies those three for me. You know, the freedom part of it is a big deal. The fact that you can go wherever you want to do, you can ride however you want. I really love that part. And honestly, it's provided me with a life that I couldn't have even dreamt of when I was a kid in Lincoln.
Yeah.
I think back to what I've done out here, and you know, there's no way I could have even thought about that as a kid in Lincoln.
Yeah.
So that's really what it means to me. Is, you know, I'm very grateful for it. I'm very humbled by it constantly, but it's somewhat almost spiritual for me. Plus the exercise, of course. You got to be, you know, you got to keep the old body going, right?
Amen to that. Yeah. And then can you? So for someone who hasn't been snowboarding for a while because of family commitments or money or whatever, or someone that hasn't ever been snowboarding before, why should they go snowboarding? What's it going to give them, or what are they missing?
Great question. Well, the first one, the obvious one, is it's massive fun. It doesn't matter how old you are. You know, it's sliding down a mountain on a piece of wood. Basically, it's just massive fun. And if you can do that safely, you know, within the limits of your physical capabilities, I think that there's a space, or there should be a space in people's life for that. As I get older, I'm much more aware of there's less and less opportunities just for pure fun. And I think that snowboarding is one of those. I think you got to use it as a way to reconnect with yourself. You know, if you're snowboarding, it's like anything that's really focus based. You can't think about other stuff. You can't think about whether you can pay the bills, any of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You're in your zone, and I think that's a really important part to nurture. You know, so I think that's another reason why people should do that. Again, you know, back to what I was talking about before, I think it makes you connect with your soul. I think it's something that it takes you outside of your thoughts that you usually have, and it kind of, especially at those moments, it connects you with something that's a little bit bigger. At least that's where I'm at with it. If you go with a crew, you've got new mates instantly. I mean, you're just about to do this thing in the camp.
Yeah.
You know, there's a bunch of people that are going to be there that I'm sure won't have seen each other before.
Yeah.
So, you know, I wish I could go to that, but there's no chance. You know, get some newish gear is what I'd say. You know, not brand new. That's another people that have a fallacy about it. And I know I'm biased because I live here and I'm within an hour's drive of 5 major ski resorts. But the place is littered with gear.
But your second-hand shops are on fire, aren't they, over there?
Oh, yeah. You know, and that's where people go when they want to try something. You know, there's second-hand shops down in Burlington, racks and racks and racks of snowboards and boots and bindings, no problem at all. Go there, you can pick up a board, $50, pick up a pair of boots for like 30 and a pair of bindings for 30. For $100 or so, you've got yourself a snowboard and kit that you can go out and start just trying it.
Yeah.
And it's perfectly serviceable. It's not like crap.
I mean, I'd say
so,
the same. Obviously you're in a fortunate position because one of the biggest brands in the world's kind of in your neighbourhood. But certainly Facebook Marketplace over here, like for second-hand kit, and I'm sure that must be like anywhere for if you're listening in the UK, like Facebook Marketplace is a gold mine for second-hand snowboard stuff. Absolutely.
It's the same way here. Every single day I see stuff that's for sale in that. So yeah, I think that's why people should do it. The last thing I'd say is the attraction is always to go to the glam resort. To go to the Travalle or Wengen or St Anton or wherever.
Yeah.
If you're just getting back into it, you don't need that. What you need is something that you can access, and you're not going to be thinking about the money part of it, and you're not going to be scaring yourself to death. You just need something where you can get back to it to be able to get that feeling back. And that feeling to me is the most important bit. That's the bit that will sustain it.
Describe that feeling.
You're in control, but you're just slightly on the edge. You are going fast enough that you're just starting to scare yourself. It's exhilarating, but at the same time, it's just fun. It's just something that has got all that combination of things all in one, as well as being in a fantastic environment in the mountains. It's to me, it's what's kept me going. I'm 62 now. I'm riding 3 times a week, and I always have been all the way through. It's one of these things that just sustains you. At least it does for me.
There you are, Lee Bryan. What an unsung legend among British snowboarding. I've always think that kind of people from the UK have played parts in snowboarding internationally, whether that's Ed Lee commentating at the Olympics, Ed and Tim, and then Ed obviously then goes on and he is part of the commentary team for the natural selection. There's like the buying powerhouses of the crew down at the TSA. They help build brands, they help shape brands. Like the UK sort of punches above its weight in the snowboard industry. You get people like Tom Kingsnorth, now like a pivotal role at Armada Snowboards. Like there's all these people out there and they don't necessarily get shouted about, or they're not the big headliners, but in their own way have tried to make snowboarding a bit better. And they've come from a background very much of DIY, which is Lee's story entirely. And I love the fact he's a crossover from skateboarding, hanging out on the deck with Sean Goff, legendary British pro vert skater and co-owner of SS20. If you go back to Mon's episode from last season, you'll hear more about him. But his name comes up fairly regularly. And so that was a great chat with Lee. As I said at the top, we've been kind of talking on and off for a couple of years, trying to sort of work it out. Not just the time difference, but just trying to find the time to tell his story, really. And there's not many people from the UK that have gone on to kind of work inside the Big B and to live to tell the tale. I don't mean that at all. But there's not many people with those insights. And it's really fascinating. And I really enjoyed it. Proper geek fest on kind of the processes of making snowboard equipment. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. So I hope you're doing all right. I hope you've been enjoying the coverage of snowboarding. I think snowboarding has come out looking absolutely great at the Winter Olympics. I do often say to people that, it's a shame that the only time you see snowboarding is to do with competitions, and that's only a very small part of what snowboarding is, but it is a massive platform. And whether you agree with Terry A. Harkinson from back in the day, or whether you think it's a positive thing, I think snowboarding is being shown pretty well. I mean, whether you like the ins and outs of, men's big air and everybody spinning to win, and obviously there was Todd Richards. Is it controversial to say what he said about it being a bit boring? I don't know. I do know that the women's looked, I think, visually just more interesting, because the jump suited their progression more than the jump suited men's progression. It's a shame the creativity didn't seem to be being rewarded as much. Like Rene Rajakangas's rips through the rail section on the slopestyle was something to behold, and he was doing stuff that no one else was interested in looking at. And he didn't seem to kind of get the shine on that. I think there's sort of some debate to be had in the pub with anybody that fancies sitting with me in the pub and talking about it, about the nuances of it all. But I think generally speaking, certainly from my perspective, snowboarding has come out looking really good. The BBC with Tim and Ed commentating, and Jenny, of course. Even Shemi Alcott, who is a skier, she seemed really knowledgeable about snowboarding, which was great to see, rather than just sort of getting people on who don't really know what they're talking about, actually getting people on who do know what they're talking about. And that was cool to see. And obviously people moan about the BBC all the time, but I think they cover a lot of stuff. Always seem to be curling on whenever I was tuning in, but people love curling, it seems. But yeah, I thought the coverage was really good, actually. I watched, obviously, Mia's Big Air live, and I know loads of people around the country were all watching that at the same time, and probably among the aging snowboarders, the blood pressure was through the roof. And fair play to you, Mia, for trying to chuck that 16 at the end, that all or nothing, go big or go home. I love that. I think that was, I don't know, maybe you could have played it safe and got a medal, but you threw it all down to go for gold. And from a snowboarder's perspective, that has to be respected. It would be interesting to get someone's perspective of an athlete who is just like, is a medal good enough? Does it have to be gold? Is just getting a medal, playing it safe and getting a medal, is that good enough? Because certainly I think in snowboarding it's the old phrase, go big or go home. And Mia went big and she got fourth, but she's 19. She's got a few more Olympic Games in her, hopefully, so let's not stress about that. Obviously Charlotte Banks and Hugh Nightingale coming first, getting a gold in the mixed snowboard cross. I think border cross is a trademarked word, isn't it? That was pretty sick. Watch that live. That was really exciting. I mean, snowboard cross is definitely, there's obviously a first past the post. There's some drama on the course. It's an easy part of snowboarding to look at, but hopefully that might have attracted a few people to our lovely sport anyway. Because border cross is one of those things, a lot of resorts have them now. They have mellow border cross runs that you can have it down with your mates and stuff, and they're really good fun and good for your snowboarding as well, like going over round berms and over little jumps and stuff and rollers and pumping. It's all good for your snowboarding. So, yeah, if you are out in the mountains and you see one, then don't shy away from it. Go and give it a go. And I promise you'll learn something. So that's pretty cool. So, yeah, the Olympics have been good. The other news that is absolutely hammering it down, certainly in the French Alps. I don't know about Austria. I heard that Lax got a massive kick in as well. But, fairly a cautionary word, I would say. There is a lot of snow coming down in the French Alps. It is extremely dangerous. Reports coming in of fatalities. There's been a weak layer since, pardon me, a week later since the start of the season, and I think then with the kind of amount of snow that's been falling on top, it's created just a bit of a dangerous season, really. So if you are going out, just be careful. Bringing that round to the camp, the Thank You Snowboarding community camp that we're putting on in March. We were thinking about getting a guide for a day or two, but we've decided to go for coaching instead. I know I said this the other week, with Owain George, who is joining us to do coaching. We figured it wasn't really worth trying to push it and get some, epic off-piste if it's dangerous, and we certainly didn't want any of our guests who are coming to feel any pressure to do anything, or even just have anxiety about the fact that we might be doing that. So I hope there's going to be like a bit of side country and all that kind of fun stuff, and some coaching so we get better. And we do have a few spots left. If you're looking at our Instagram, you'll notice that Park Coffee in West Sussex, Borg Samaris ex-local Pete Williams has now become an expert coffee brewer, and he's got his own little roastery down in West Sussex. And me and Duncan Wright, the filmer from The Reason, went down there the other day to basically, he's going to hook us up with coffee for everyone to drink, and every guest that comes will take home a bag of specially brewed for us coffee, which will and also a discount code for future orders. Rocket fuel to get us going in the morning. That was really cool. So we're going to have some of that stuff too. And I think Pete's going to be around as well during that week. So if I suck at making coffee, at some point, somebody will come along that is great at making coffee. So we do have a few spaces left on the camp. It's 22nd to the 29th of August. March, it's definitely in March. We've got a really nice chalet with a sauna and a hot tub. And Burton, Max, who rides for Burton, is going to be over with a load of boards and step-ons for everyone to try. We're going to be sending out a questionnaire in the next couple of weeks about what you like riding and your boot size and all that kind of stuff, so we can basically make a bespoke test centre around what our guests are interested in riding. And then Dan from Burton might also be over, and he is a great individual, so hopefully he's going to pop over. Chris Moran's talking about coming over. Skier Jim's talking about coming over down from Val d'Isere. Cool Bus Rob's talking about coming out from Borg. So hopefully we're gonna be doing some podcasting stuff there as well. The chairlift chats, I'll be recording them to be put out over the summer. So I'll be sat on chairlifts with our guests, and I'll be recording some of those conversations. They went down a treat last summer, so we're going to be doing some more of them. And we're also going to maybe do a live edition of the podcast, either with someone that we've had on before, just in a more informal setting, or with maybe someone new, depending on who we get near at a time. So if you are on the camp, you can also be part of the podcast as well. So that's really exciting stuff. You get 6 nights, food cooked for you, going to be delicious, home cooked food. Me and Kate, who are running the camp, as you know, I used to run a chalet in Borg Samaris for about 15 years, and Kate worked for us. And so we know what we're doing. Good home-cooked food. Anybody that stayed with us at the chalet back then will know that each night we put on the table enough food to stop an army. And we'll be doing the same again. 7 nights accommodation in a really cool chalet, a Burton test centre. We are also have an exclusive 15% discount at the Snowboard Asylum on new kit. If you need to buy anything before you come out, then we will give you that discount code. We're going to have a day of coaching from Owain George. If you go back a couple of episodes, you'll hear him talking about his sort of qualifications and his love of helping other people get better at snowboarding. I am all in to improve my technique. I realise I've never had any formal training or coaching or anything, and I'm sure I could be better than I am. So I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully hopefully, if you book on, you'll be looking forward to that as well. What else is there? Duncan Wright, who I mentioned before, he's going to be out there filming with us. So basically just making daily edits so that at the end of the week, you've got lots of video memories to take home with you. So yeah, basically it's going to be the raddest week of snowboarding. And it's come about because when I was staying at Chris Moran's house last winter, and there's lots of people there, and I feel lucky that I have that kind of environment to go into, but not everybody has that. Either you've only got like one or two people in your little shred crew, and maybe they can't make it out, and you're thinking, oh man, maybe I won't go this season because I haven't got anyone to go with. Or, you have got a couple of shred mates, but you just fancy being part of something bigger and making you some new friends and being part of something else. And that is exactly who the camp is for. It's going to be, everybody who's booked on seems absolutely lovely, and there are a couple of spots left. So if you are interested, then send us an email to thankyouSnowboarding@gmail.com, and we'll get you booked in. We'll let you know how to do it. All right. I've shouted out Burton, shouted out Snowboard Asylum. If you are new to this sport and you do need some advice about what kit to buy, don't take the advice of your friend who is like, well, I've got a 161 and that's what will do it because I weigh 10 stone or whatever it is. Go and see the professionals. If you walk into any Snowboard Asylum shop, you will find more experience in the staff members there than the age of the sport itself, I imagine. So go and speak to the people who know, because the right snowboarding kit will make your trip or your trip to the snow dome or your trip to the dry slope that much better. There's no point fighting against the improper kit for you. And everybody's bodies are different. Everybody's, sort of weight ratios are different. So you do need something that suits you, not just what your friend who's been once recommends, because chances are your friends don't know or don't have the experience to know entirely what they're talking about. I would tell friends of mine, I wouldn't advise friends of mine very much. I would tell them to go and speak to people who know more than me. And those guys in the UK are the Snowboard Asylums, or really any independent snowboard shop that's been going for a decent amount of time. So do the right thing, go and see those people. And that is it. We've clocked in another long one this time. We've got some really fun, interesting coming up. We've got Marcus Chapman, we have got John Weaver, we've got Sketch, but we are sort of barreling towards the end of the season. So if there's anybody who I haven't interviewed yet that you would particularly like to hear from, then give me a shout across the socials or on email, and everything is in the show notes underneath. And I'll do my best to get them on and ask the questions that you want to know. All right, that's it for now. Thank you, snowboarding, as ever. See you next week. Peace.